Good evening. Thanks for joining the class today. Last week, we were talking about urodynamic study in rural areas. Many of you may have been earlier wondering, what would a urologist do in a very remote or rural areas? But then we saw how we can do urodynamic studies in remote or very rural areas. And I can tell you that even now, urodynamic studies are considered as a fairly sophisticated investigation. But then we understood that once you understand the principles, it is very simple to do. All we need to do is pass two infant feeding tubes, one for filling the bladder, one for measure pressure. And if you know how to interpret by actually looking at the patient, we can derive a lot of conclusions and you can decide on how you're going to proceed with the treatment. For example, we said if somebody has benign prostatic hypertrophy, which is causing obstruction, we said the normal pressure, voiding pressure is about 60 centimeters. If it is about 90 centimeters, then they will benefit by surgical treatment. And it should be considered as soon as possible because they have a chance of going into acute painful retention. On the other hand, if it is between 60 to 90 centimeters, we can actually try out the various medications. And we also saw how to decide on which medication to give and so on. So these sort of, and we saw a variety of what we call lower urinary tract symptoms, which is said how we can interpret them based on the findings in the systemetrogram. And the need for sophisticated or complicated equipment for CMG or a systemetrogram or bladder pressure study that we call was because the catheter inside the bladder measures the total pressure of what the bladder muscles contract to generate, and also the pressure which is generated by the abdominal wall. And the computer, all it does is subtract the total pressure from the abdominal pressure, which is measured through a sensor in the rectum, and then it calculates and tells us. But then if you are staying there and watching what is happening, we can easily interpret and find out what is happening and make the correct interpretation. And in addition to that, if you go through it once more, you'll understand the various steps involved in bladder pressure studies. But now we're going to talk today about cystoscopy. Once we have the combination of the bladder pressure studies and what we find in cystoscopy, most of the urological diagnosis can be made and we can give the necessary treatment. Later on, we'll discuss how we can treat these conditions in rural areas. Can you have the next slide, please? Okay, so can you have the next slide, please? So the basic instrument or equipment that you need to do a diagnostic cystoscopy or have a look inside the bladder is called a cystoscope. The rigid cystoscope has been around for a long time. And the flexible cystoscope was developed fairly recently. Actually, the flexible cystoscope was modified and made thinner because they got the idea from the gastroscope. But then both are very expensive. The flexible cystoscope is very expensive. It can cost in Indian rupees is almost 5 or 6 lakhs or even more, which is quite out of reach of most of the rural areas. And again, the regular cystoscope that we are talking about is again expensive. It's not a cheap equipment so that every rural surgeon or every one who is practicing surgery in rural areas can have. This is because it has 3 primary components. The most expensive part is the telescope, the one Just 1 minute, I'll see if I can do the annotations. Okay, let's take the arrow. Okay, so this is the telescope, what we see here. And that has a combination of what is called rod lenses, multiple lenses which are together. And what it does is, it does two things. One, it transmits light. There is a place where you collect the light cord and you need a light source which connects to this. And then it shines the lights inside the bladder. And also it takes the images back, and through the eyepiece, you can either directly see the images from the telescope, or we can connect, if we have the facilities, you can connect camera, and the camera can be connected to the monitor. Even the simple setup, if you buy the Chinese equipment, will be quite expensive. It costs about almost 6 lakhs in Indian rupees. And the reason is that the telescope is expensive. Then we need to have the light source. Then we need to have the camera. And but then some people do invest in all these because the same camera and light source can be used for laparoscopic surgeries. But then what come up now newly is what we call laptop cystoscope. All that we did was we replaced the telescope with a camera and a USB attachment. So now what all that is necessary is to connect this to the laptop computer. Then you have the entire setup. So it this costs only about 50,000 rupees or $1,000, less than $1,000. So now with less than $1,000, you have the entire setup to do a diagnostic cystoscopy. You don't need any other equipment because the light source is not necessary because it takes light from the laptop. Camera is not necessary attachment because the images can be seen in the system, in the screen of the laptop. So it is possible for anyone. I mean, it's not a very huge amount of investment, but then the information that you can get from doing a cystometrogram or bladder pressure studies and the cystoscopy is really vast, especially in a rural setting. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons, when we said we need to know a little bit of urology, was that in a very remote area, as I said last time, in the foothills of Himalayas, they have been going to the remote villages and conducting medical camps. Every month on a fixed day, they go to these villages and see patients. We analyzed the data that they had for the last 10 years, and we found that the maximum number of patients they saw were urology. In fact, the number of urology patients were more than the number of general surgery patients or even gynecology patients. So it is a very, very useful equipment to have and to learn. Okay. And now we'll come to what are the indications for cystoscopy. Okay, first, as I said, when in the beginning, it is part of the study. Whenever we do bladder pressure studies or cystometrogram, we combine it with the cystoscopy. But otherwise, what are the indications? Hematuria is one indication which nobody will deny. If they have blood in the urine, whether it is macroscopic, in the sense that you can actually see the blood in the urine, or microscopic, which is when you test the urine and found that there is blood in the urine, then it is important to find out where where the blood is coming from. And very often, you'll need treatment for it. And again, urinary tract infection is not very common because what happens is that, like we discussed last week, the bladder does not have sterile urine. there is some amount of bacteria in the urine that we have in the bladder. And doubling time for one bacteria to become two bacteria, it's about 20 minutes. And it does not, I mean, we have symptoms of significant infection only when the level reaches 1 lakh per ml of bacteria. But then we don't reach this level primarily because once you pass urine, we empty it. And then we start all over again. But then if there is infection, which means there is some problem, either with the emptying, you have a large residue, or there is a block, or there is a prostate, or there is a bladder tumor or something which produces this blood. So any hematuria is a very important indication for doing a cystoscopy. And again, infection, as I said, means again that there is something which causes the infection. It can either be a benign prostatic hypertrophy which causes a block and significant increase in residual urine, or there may be some stones and other nidus in the bladder which causes an infection. So the two important indications is so far we have seen, one is blood in the urine, next is infection in the urine. And again, should we do a cystoscopy if they have a history of hematuria, in the sense they had 3-4 days back or 1 week back? It's still important to do a cystoscopy to make sure what is wrong, to find out what is wrong. Next slide, please.
Sir, could you please disable your video feed? We are losing your voice a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. I think you need to do something with the annotation. Now, is it okay? Can you hear now?
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Okay. So then the first indication we said was blood in the urine or hematuria. The next set of indications for doing the cystoscopy is when you have these lower urinary tract symptoms. But this last week discussed, these are the indications that we do for doing a bladder pressure studies, so urodynamic studies. We said we have 4 obstructive symptoms, which is because of block to the urinary passage. So normally the bladder has to generate about 60 centimeters of pressure to pass urine. So when there is a block obstruction, it has to take a longer time to reach a pressure which starts the flow of urine. So what it means is that instead of 60, it might take 70 or 80 or 90 centimeters of pressure to start passing urine. How the patient interprets is that there is hesitancy. If you go to the toilet, the urine doesn't come immediately. Then with further obstruction, it goes on to a stage where the urinary stream is poor. And then we said it can become intermittent. So you're not in one stretch able to totally empty the bladder. So the pressure keeps going up and down because you use abdominal pressure to pass urine. And then finally, it goes to incomplete voiding and high residue. Next one. So then, next slide, please. Then we have what we call the irritative symptoms. This again, normally you don't need to get up to pass urine in the night. So here with the irritative symptoms, they need to frequently get up to pass urine. Then the frequency increases both day and night. And then because of mild infection and inflammation, there is some burning while passing urine. And then later on, there is urgency because the bladder starts contracting. We have what we call unstable contractions. Next slide. So the important indications are, one is that most important indication, which you definitely have to do a cystoscopy diagnosis, is blood in the urine, whether it is macroscopic or microscopic. Then the next common indication is the lower urinary tract symptoms, which are primarily divided into obstructive and irritated. So hesitancy, poor stream, intermittency, and incomplete voiding. And then nocturia or increased frequency and urgency. But again, there are other indications for doing a cystoscopy. The first two, very often we combine it with the cystometrogram, especially if there are symptoms. But then if the urinary stream is very thin, then we suspect a stricture. Here, the difference between the thin stream which occurs in prostate and stricture is that with prostate, the straining might not improve the stream. But people who have stricture, it is only a narrowing. So when they strain, the stream actually improves. But then it'll still be thin. So that is how you diagnose stricture by history. And usually occurs in a younger person. And normally the size of the urethra, if you describe in French, is about 30 French, which is about 1 centimeter in diameter. Only when the size or diameter comes to about 1/3 of that, about 10 French, we start having these symptoms. So that is one indication for cystoscopy. If there is a thin stream and straining improves the stream. And then we can have what is called urinary incontinence, which can be either stress incontinence or urge incontinence or continuous dribbling. Stress incontinence usually occurs if there is, especially in women, if the sphincter is lax. So it normally occurs when the bladder is full. And then any stress which increases the abdominal pressure, like coughing or sneezing or laughing or anything which increases abdominal pressure, increases the total pressure in the bladder. So a little bit of urine will leak out. This is called stress incontinence. And then urge incontinence is, we have what is called unstable detrusor contractions. Last class, we saw that if there are neurological problems in the bladder muscles become unstable. In other words, they become sort of irritable and they start contracting. So these are interpreted as urgency or trying to pass urine. The desire to pass urine will be there as a sensation. But then what happens is that sometimes the sphincter can relax a little bit and urine can come out. But then if there is a fistula, especially vesicovaginal fistula, anything, then there will be continuous dribbling of urine. So cystoscopy is necessary to find out what exactly is happening, whether we have a stricture or whether there is any urgency or incontinence, which is stress incontinence or urge incontinence, or is any continuous dribbling. Or if there is any suspicion of malignancy. Malignancy, generally we suspect if there is any blood in the urine. Or if suspecting any congenital anomalies, then again it's important to do a cystoscopy to find out. Maybe we'll just have a quick look at a video which shows one of the congenital abnormalities. Okay, so can you show the video about uretrocele? So while he's trying to get the video organized, so we said one of the most important thing when you do a cystoscopy. Can we start with the video?
This is a patient who has what we call uretrocele. It's a congenital abnormality where the lower portion of the ureter is distended. You can see it here in the ultrasound that there is a bulge in the lower portion of the ureter. The same thing can be seen in the CT scan. it causes a relative obstruction. And then there are some mild hydroprotic changes in the kidney on the left side. Sometimes, because of the dilatation and collection, the stones can form in it. The surgery is called incision of the urethral. It's a simple thing to make the opening large and drain it into the bladder. This is the ureteric orifice on the right side, and you can actually see quite a big bulge. It's like a cystic lesion in the left side. At this point, it probably will be difficult to locate the ureteric orifice. So what we're going to do is just going to incise it first.
Needle.
With the bug beak.
The needle, please. Some pressure.
Increase பண்ணுங்க. ஏன் இதாக மாட்டேங்குது?
Probably the video is not very clear. What happens is the urethral is a cystic dilatation on the lower end of the ureter. So it can essentially causes a block to the urinary passage. Now actually this is inside the urethral that you are seeing.
So what we have done is we have incised the urethral and then went inside and put in a guide wire. Now we're going to put a DJ stent so that it facilitates healing around it. Okay, let's open it wide open.
This DJ stenting is another procedure that all of you should learn, which is a very simple.
So what happens is if this is the ureteric orifice, it forms a big blob like this, and it's a very narrow opening. So what you have done is you have made a big incision here to make the opening wide and put a double J stent to prevent it from stricturing. This incision will help to cure the block which is there and also open the urethral into the bladder. This patient had what we call a urethral of the ureter, lower portion of the ureter. It's a cystic dilatation of the lower portion, which is a congenital lesion which occurs 1 in 4,000 births. The problem is that it can cause obstruction, hydronephrosis and frequent infection. So what she had last time was that we had done what we call incision of the urethral or cutting out the roof of the urethral so that the obstruction is relieved. And we had put in a DJ stent. Now as you can see, that's a ureter which is really dilated. There's no more obstruction. And the dilatation of the ureter you see now is because of the earlier obstruction and the stent. And here there was a bulge and there's a very tiny opening last time. Now it looks like almost a normal ureteric orifice. Now I'm going to just remove the stent. So you go there, whenever you remove a stent, normally you go in with the grasper closed, open it, then turn it to the convenient angle, close and pull, make sure that it is not catching any of the tissue, then pull it out.
Okay, so can you go back to the slides? You can go to the next slide.
Urethral is a congenital.
Okay, so we are discussing before this the various indications for cystoscopy. So first we said this hematuria, then the lower urinary tract symptoms, then other symptoms like incontinence, And now, again, as I said, the most common indication that we do is part of the cystometrogram, and we follow it up with the cystoscopy to make complete diagnosis. Then again, you can use it for various other things like staging of cancers, then before sling operations, or as part of other procedures for colpo suspension and so on. The next slide. Okay, so then before we post any patient for cystoscopy, you should warn them that they will have some symptoms because of that. And you should warn them that they may have mild burning pain, or there may be a little bit of bleeding, and then occasionally they may have infection. And if you're not careful, actually it can cause a significant injury to the urethra and bladder. So all this should be explained to the patient, and it's important to take a consent. You should not treat this as a minor procedure. It is actually a major surgical procedure, and proper consent should be taken. Next slide, please. Okay. And then in a rural setting, we would always like to give prophylactic antibiotics. In many of the Western operating rooms, they may not like giving prophylactic antibiotic for routine procedures. In rural areas, we prefer this for a variety of reasons. One, we cannot be 100% sure of the sterility. In fact, one of the PhD students from Netherlands came and he did a study in many of rural operating rooms. And he found that the autoclaves in the rural areas, they did not always guarantee 100% sterility, because there are various settings which need to be correct for having 100% sterility. So we cannot guarantee 100% sterility with the low-cost equipment that we use. And the other advantage we have is that most of the patients in rural areas, they would not have had all these antibiotics earlier, and most of them will be sensitive. So 1 dose or 2 doses should suffice. So what we prefer generally is, if you are giving injectables, 1 dose of third generation cephalosporin like cefotaxime, ceftazidime or ceftriaxone, and 1 dose of aminoglycoside like gentamicin, amikacin. But then these are expensive and these are injectable. And if we have sufficient time, you can 1 day or 2 days, you can start fluoroquinolone like ciproflox, 500 milligram 2 times a day, and then do the cystoscopy. Then you may not need any other antibiotic. But antibiotic becomes important if you're suspecting any obstruction. So if you think that there is a prostate and you have a post-void residue, then it is very important to have an antibiotic. Again, if you think there is hydronephrosis, then again it is important to have a prophylactic antibiotic. But then as a rule of the thumb, we would prefer that we generally give antibiotic to start with. Next slide, please. Okay, so can you have the next slide? Then what we do is we place a patient in lithotomy position, and then we clean and drape as per any regular surgery. Because as I said, it's important to treat cystoscopy as a regular major surgical procedure and not a simple thing. Because urosepsis can be quite severe, and some patients can die if they have a severe sepsis, especially if there is a blocked system. And you never know what you are going to find. So it is important to treat it like a major sterile surgery. Okay, and then when you're cleaning, and this is another thing to remember, is that you start cleaning from the orifice, whether it's a female urethral orifice or male urethral. You start with that and then start going round and round and clean the rest of the area. This is because we want the cleaning solution like a betadine or whatever it is to stay the longest at the place where it's necessary. Because it is through the orifice you'll introduce the bacteria. And in women, we generally don't need to do, may need any anesthesia unless you're trying to do a procedure. And with experience, even for minor procedures, you may not need anesthesia. But for men, especially when you're starting, it's good to use spinal anesthesia and do the cystoscopy. Next slide, please. Okay. So this, we're coming to we're talking about the regular cystoscope that is available in the market. It has three parts. One is what we talked earlier is the telescope. So this has a rod lens and it is used both for transmitting light into the bladder and again transmitting the images from the bladder into the eyepiece, where we can connect a camera to view it in the monitor. And then there is a bridge. And then we have the sheath. The sheath, again, it's described in various sizes. As I said, the normal urethra is about 30 French, or about 1 centimeter in diameter. So if you're doing just a diagnosis, it's enough if you just get 19 French sheath, and you can use it for even if you had to do a minor procedure like DJ stenting. 19, 20, 21 French sheaths are sufficient for these. And the bridge also, earlier they used to get these bridges with two, I mean, this is only one space for passing the guide wire or a stent or a pusher and other thing. And the earlier one, they used to have two of these and in a small round thing to manipulate it. You don't need all that. It's enough if you buy a simple one with just one channel. And then, as I said earlier, we need the additional things like the light source, the light cord, camera, and TV monitor if you're doing a regular cystoscopy. But then the new cystoscope that we designed, as I said, is just a laptop cystoscope, and you can straight away connect to the laptop computer and start using it. You don't need these additional light sources and camera and monitor and all that. Next slide, please. Okay, so then if you're using a camera, you need to adjust the 12 o'clock position correctly. If you look through the telescope, there will be a small mark on the top of the telescope at 12 o'clock. And that has to be at, and the camera and the scope 12 o'clock should match. And you should hold it still. You can rotate the scope this way and that way. I think I'll see what you can do is you hold the camera still. And the 12 o'clock, there's a notch in the telescope, which has to be at 12 o'clock. Then holding the camera still, you can rotate to 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever position you want. That will give you an idea how to match the picture that you see on the screen with what is happening in reality. This is important because you need to go along the curve of the ureter. So here what you see is it's the normal urethra curves shown. See, normally this is the orifice, then it goes like this is called the bulbar urethra where the sphincter is, and then you go to the bladder. So, but we'll show you when you're doing the scopy, you need to hold the penis up so that this goes up like this, and you have only one curve to negotiate. So if you hold this up, then you just make it straight, go like this, turn and go into the bladder. Again, when one of the dictum in urology is anything will go into anything else well lubricated. So you have to make sure there is adequate lubrication. And then the one place where you will have problem is that when you reach the area of the sphincter, because rest of the thing there is nothing which closes the urethra. So normally it's even though it's a collapsed tubing, when you pass irrigating fluid, it opens and makes it look like a nice circular thing. But then that continues the penile urethra, and at the place of bulbar urethra where the sphincter is, it becomes narrow because the patient will not like the procedure that you're doing, especially if you're doing it under local. Then you're not sure because then you can't see the lumen, and if you try and push, it can cause serious injuries. So what you need to do is, if you're doing, it is important to do that when you're doing under local anesthesia. You need to go near the sphincter and you have to push only under vision. You should not blindly push and you should not use any force. So when you're at this, initially the patient will contract, but then he needs to do the voluntary muscles and the adjacent muscles, everything he'll use to tightly contract the sphincter. But then he cannot hold it for a long time. So what you do is you gently wait at the level of the sphincter. Then once the patient relaxes the sphincter, then it's easy to pass it. Especially if you're doing under local anesthesia, you need to be very, very careful of that. Okay, so can we show the video of that cystoscopy? So what is, we are going to show a video of the scopy, but not with the regular scope. We're going to use the larger scope that we use for cystolithal apexy. So you need to, we'll be doing it a little slowly. So you need to understand the various things that we're talking about. One, you need to hold the penis up so that there's only one curve to negotiate. You have to pass under vision and then bring the scope down so that one curve is negotiated upward. So go like this, wait at the sphincter and then go up. Are you playing the video? Ah.
We're going to show you a cystoscopy procedure. What we're using here is not the regular cystoscope, which is usually 19 or 22 French. This is a 25 French scope that we use for cystolithal apexy. You assemble it and you hold it with the right hand as shown. You need to hold the sheath, the bridge, and the telescope so that none of these fall down. And the left hand is used for holding the penis or manipulating. Normally, we need not use jelly if we're using a smaller scope, but here we're using it because we're using a 25 French scope. So first you hold the penis between your fingers and open the orifice.
Open the orifice and then...
And you're doing, holding it up so that the curve becomes easier to negotiate. You need to pass the urethra under vision. And this is a place where the urethra turns at the level of the sphincter or verruc. So here we watch you go down and go up into the bladder. If you watch from outside, you'll know what we're doing. Here we're having a little difficulty because it's a narrow urethra. See what, need to bend down and then go into the bladder. And here you see the stone sitting there.
Here, what you would have noticed is that at the area where the... Yes, can you go back to the... The area where we found the bulbar urethra where we needed to turn, it was tight. because northeast people are a little shorter. So their urethra may not be 30 French. The normal size may be around 25, 27 French like that. So when you're using a large scope, negotiating is a little difficult. And if you use any force, it can cause a significant injury and stricture in that area. So that is the reason we need to sort of gently go and turn and initially go like this, and then you start turning up and then go into the bladder. And once again, I would like to point out that if you're doing it under local anesthesia, when you reach the sphincter, it's good to wait for a while so that you get the right angle and make sure everything is correct. And use constant pressure, not too much of pressure, and wait for sufficient time so that the patient relaxes the sphincter and you can push it in. The next slide, please. Okay, so then once you go to the bladder, again, you should not get confused because there are a lot of things. So you need to have one systematic way of looking at the bladder so that you don't miss anything. Because you need to realize that if you're buying only one telescope, it is good to buy a 30 degrees telescope. 30 degrees telescope is like that. It sees downward about 30 degrees. So 0 degrees you can see straight like this. 30 degrees, it points a little downward. So you start looking, this will probably the area of the bladder neck, which is fairly easy to identify. So you start looking at the bladder neck, and then slowly you go up. And then you'll see what labeled as C here, which is called interureteric ridge or Mercier's bar. So this again is a slightly elevated portion in the bladder and fairly easy to identify. So once you identify that, then you just go on either side. You can move to the laterally to find the one ureteric orifice and the other ureteric orifice. Again, sometimes it may be very difficult to locate the ureteric orifice. So what you need to do is, you need to wait at the approximate site of the ureteric orifice. And the urine comes down from the kidney in peristalsis. So it might take about 1 to 2 minutes or 3 minutes for the peristalsis to come. So when the peristalsis comes, the orifice opens and there is a flow of urine coming out. And even though this is the approximate normal position, it can be more lateral, especially if there is some amount of vesicoureteric reflux. There can be more lateral position of the orifice. Then you go and look at the walls, lateral walls on either side. And then you go to the dome of the bladder. And this is the anterior wall of the bladder. So this, sometimes what you have to do is, you might not be able to see fully the anterior wall if the bladder is too full. So you might have to empty the bladder and then apply some pressure from the abdomen so that the anterior wall comes down. And very often, a little bit of air gets into the bladder when you're doing scopy. So you may be able to observe the fundic air bubble also there. So this is important because especially if there is any cancers, like transitional cancers, it is multicentric in origin. So you might miss unless you thoroughly have a full look at the bladder. And you need to have something like this to record so that whatever you find, you should record and keep it at the right place. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, we'll just show you some pictures of the findings. So normally what you see here, here you see a stricture. So this is the size of the normal urethra. So it's almost a full length that you see. You'll see any thicker over there. Okay, so this will be the normal size of the urethra, which is about 30 French. And this is the opening of a stricture. So when you see this, you should not blindly push, because then it can cause lots more damage, and the patient won't be able to pass urine after that. So the way we treat it is we first pass a guide wire through this, and then slowly cut it open, and to see only when the guide wire reaches the bladder, we slowly cut and enter the bladder. But then the more you can do anything in this area, the more chance of you causing more damage. So when you see something like this, it's better to wait if the patient is able to pass urine, or pass a small infant feeding tube or some catheter, so that you can wait for the urologist to come. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is how prostate will appear. So if you're doing a cystoscopy for a prostate, this area will probably be the verumontana. And the sphincter is at the level of the veru. And then the bladder actually curves up. If this is the veru, the bladder, the prostates are here, and the bladder will be somewhere here. So if there is an obstruction, this is the two lobes are there, and very often they are unequal. And this is the passage. So again, here you need to be very careful to go along the passage into the bladder. So if you can notice, it is not a straight entry into the bladder. It sort of curves a little bit. And one more thing you need to appreciate is that whenever you're seeing, you're not, especially if you're using a 30 degrees, you need to tilt the scope a little bit to look straight. So if you have it absolutely straight, then you realize that you're looking down. So if you need to look here, you need to tilt a little bit and then go. And you need to tilt and go like this straight. So that takes a little bit of experience to learn. And it's good to learn that how you move forward in the penile urethra rather than in the bulbar urethra and other places. And sometimes the prostate can be very vascular. So these vessels can bleed, especially after a scopy. So you need to be very, very gentle when you're doing viewing a BPH or prostate. The next slide, please. Okay, so this is the interureteric ridge that we are talking about. And this is the ureteric orifice. So this, generally it looks like a slit like this. So, and normally these two edges will be close together. So you might miss it, especially if the bladder has a lot of trabeculations. You may not be able to see the orifice properly, it will be closed. But if you wait for a while, then when the urine comes, it sort of opens and urine flows out. So that is the time you can actually see the orifice. And one other thing you need to learn how to do is do a stenting. So your first step in that is to pass a guide wire through the orifice. So if you poke around and cause a false passage or a little bit of bleeding and edema and all that, it's finding the location of the orifice later will be difficult. So it is important to wait for urine to come out. And once you have found it, immediately again don't poke, because the next time the urine will come out will maybe another 2 or 3 minutes. And you can ask the anesthetist to give a little more fluids, and so that there is some amount of hydration. And the first video that we showed, we saw a ureterocele. That will look like this, like a bulge. And here, again, finding the orifice may be difficult, maybe here or maybe behind. So there also, again, the important thing is to wait to see how the urine is coming out, and then we can do something to identify it. Next slide, please. Okay, so this, again, this what it does is, what you're seeing here is hypertrophied bladder. So this is one of the causes of unstable contractions or poor compliance that we were talking about last week. So what happens is that if there is a block, the bladder muscle has to work hard to release the, make you pass urine. So the muscles, like how we do exercise, once you do a lot of exercise, your muscle become big. So similarly, the bladder muscle become big. And they are seen as hypertrophied muscles. And the bladder muscles are arranged in a crisscross way so that when it expands, there is no increase in pressure. For when it's about 100 to 350 ml, the bladder can expand, normal bladder can expand without any change of pressure. But then that is not possible with a hypertrophied bladder muscle. And when the hypertrophy is a little too much, then you can get what is called these diverticular. So a little bit of the mucosa sort of like a hernia goes inside and then develops there between the muscle fibers. And this is important because you need to, if there is any bladder cancer, then you need to inspect all the diverticular to make sure there are no cancer cells there or cancer tissues there. If you have a stone which you break, that again can go inside and get stuck in the diverticula. And one more thing you need to remember is that if there is a diverticula, then it's not possible to empty the bladder completely because there are no muscles which pushes the urine out of the diverticulum. So then you need to ask them to practice double voiding and treat whatever condition which is causing the diverticulum. Next one, please. Okay. This is probably the most common cause of hematuria or blood in the urine, transitional cell carcinoma. It is important to, even if they had a history of bleeding, that is the reason that you need to do a scopy to find out whether they have any TCC in the bladder. The advantage of finding early is that you can, it is fairly easy to treat when it's small. So all you need to do is with the electric current, you can destroy this. First, of course, you take a little bit for biopsy and to confirm the diagnosis. Then with the electric current, you destroy these cells. But then you need to keep on doing it because it's a multicentric origin. So it can occur anytime, anywhere in the bladder. So the normally what we say is that you do a cystoscopy every month till there is 3 times there is no recurrence. And then once in 3 months, again till 3 times there is no recurrence. Then once in 6 months, and then once a year there is no recurrence. But anytime in between, if there is any bleeding or any recurrence, you should immediately go in and have a look. And if you do that, even though the textbook may say that prognosis is not good, we have had many patients whom we have given this treatment for almost 10, 12 years. Now we have one of the senior nurses, nuns in a place where we work, who has had the first time the tumor extending almost 80% of the bladder. But then in 2 sittings, we were able to completely remove the tumor. And then every month we were doing check cystoscopies and whatever recurrence we were destroying. Now it's more than 12 years and she's still doing okay. So this is where the importance again to record properly and have a full look at the bladder so that you don't miss any of these lesions. Next one. Okay, so this is a vesicovaginal fistula. So here what happens is that there is an opening between the bladder and the vagina. So this side is the bladder tissue and this is the edge of the fistula, and here is probably the vaginal wall. So, I mean, one way, it might sometimes be difficult if it is a small opening to visualize it. So you can either scope from the vagina or from the bladder to have a look at it. And if it is a very tiny one, sometimes it may be just enough to cauterize the edges and keep a bladder drainage for a while. It might settle. Next one. Okay, this is one condition which you'll probably find quite often in India. They say that tuberculosis can mimic almost any disease. So bladder also, it causes significant fibrosis. And long-standing tuberculosis causes what we call a thimble bladder, or the bladder becomes really tiny because of fibrosis. And this is just one type of appearance that we have shown here. It can appear almost like anything. So if there is, one of the ways to diagnose is that if there are a lot of pus cells and whenever you keep on repeating the urine cultures, it always shows no growth. So then it is likely to be a tuberculosis. Then you check the ESR, then you can send for TB cultures, or you can take for biopsy and send it. With biopsy, it might just come back as the granular tissue. But then it is curable if you give anti-TB treatment. Next one. Thank you. This is what happened. Okay, this is again one type of bladder stone. And one other thing which bladder stone does is, if it is for a long-standing thing, it can cause inflammation around the bladder. So sometimes there may be so much blood and inflammatory tissue in the bladder that you may not be able to see the stone unless you give a bladder wash. And the small bladder, stones, can cause obstruction also. They can come into the, in fact, up to 2 centimeters is the ideal size for causing obstruction. And these small ones causing obstructions can go and hide in the diverticulum. So you might think that when you do a scopy, you may not find it, but then you have to search properly to find it so that you detect and remove the stone. So we've shown you some of the common, how some of the common findings look. Okay, so we have one more video, no? So we'll just play that video and then after that, we'll summarize and close.
So this is a patient who had a road traffic accident and had needed a SPC 3 years ago. And he was in a SPC and they were not able to pass any urine from below. So last time what we did was what is called a go-through EAU. Because it's a total blockage, we need to scope from above and below and cut only the scar tissue. That will slowly lead to the strictured area, and we managed to put in an 18 French catheter from below. So this time we are doing a repeat procedure to cut and put a much larger catheter. The first step in doing EAU, whether the repeat or first, is to pass a guide wire. Earlier, you can also use an open-ended catheter. It doesn't seem to go completely.
If you notice in the picture, there's only a tiny opening which just allowed, will probably allow only the guide wire. Yes, it had already operated once. The opening is much larger. And it is important to pass the guide wire because otherwise you lose track of where you are and you can cause a lot of damage.
We use a half round sheath. See, here is probably a false passage is created by earlier catheterization effort. Now we'll cut a little more and then try and pass a larger catheter, 20 French. 24, I don't know. 20. Okay, 22.
Okay, so we can stop it. Okay, now summarizing. So what we saw was that cystoscopy diagnosis is an important tool that you need to have in an armamentarium of a surgeon working in a rural area. As I said in the beginning, it is one of the most common presentations in even in a rural area. When we did the survey in a place called Arohi in the foothills of Himalayas, urology problems are more common than general surgery or gynecology problems. And almost 90% or 95% of these problems can be diagnosed if you are able to learn these two skills properly. One, how to do a cystometrogram or bladder pressure studies. And again, to do a cystoscopy. So the cystoscopy will help you diagnose any of these common conditions. So whether it be a stricture, whether you have a prostate, whether you have a bladder tumor, whether you have a stone in the bladder, congenital anomalies like the ureterocele or a vesicoureteric reflux, or neurological problems because of hypertrophied bladder or tuberculosis. So once you do combine both urodynamic studies or bladder pressure studies and cystoscopy, you can have the full spectrum of diagnosis covered. And we'll probably have one more class on, we'll show you the low-cost cystoscope that we have made, which does away with the telescope and the camera and also the light source and so on, which are expensive. So with the investment of about little less than $1,000, you can have a full set of how to diagnose. But then you might ask, what is the catch? The problem is that these are ordinary camera. So what it does is this autofocus camera. So autofocus, it takes a few seconds to focus into the place. The advantage of telescope is that you get continuous images. So what happens is that whatever you can see, it is very clear and continuous. But then if you're using the low-cost laptop cystoscope, it takes a few seconds for it to focus. So the important thing is you need to wait till it focuses, and the movement should be gentle. So if you're shaking and if you're moving too fast, then it'll be out of focus. But if you're gently and slowly moving, then it'll be the correct focus. And it is good enough for diagnosis and also doing a minor procedures like double J stenting. In one of the classes, we'll teach you how to do a double J stenting. So it is, it is possible to make the entire spectrum of urology diagnosis with these two low-cost diagnostic modes: bladder pressure studies and the low-cost cystoscope, a laptop cystoscope. I think we have another 5 to 6 minutes for any questions. If any of you have any questions, we'll answer them. Okay, so can you unmute all of them, and if anybody is like to ask any questions or type in the question, then we can. think someone has asked about the video links. Okay, so have you sent all the links to them?
Yes, sir. I've been sending the links. If anybody here would like the links again, you can just send me your email IDs, or you can send it here in the chat section, and we'd be happy to share the link with you. The link will take you to also all the other previous lectures we've been conducting. I think by now we have this is our 12th class. So you'll get recordings to the lectures as well as reference videos, and the PowerPoints are all included in separate folders, so it'll be easy for you to navigate.
Another way of doing it is to go to the LabGuru website, and you might have to register. It's a free registration. And then you'll be able to see the recorded videos. So if you go to LabGuru, register yourself, and then go to recorded videos and click on, search for GILS or rural urology. You'll get all these videos, and you'll be able to watch the entire recording. And I think they have a PowerPoints also. Any
Thank you,
questions?
Dr. Gauraj. Thank you, Gauraj.
Yeah, hello sir, how are you?
Presentation. I have lost my mother, so I have to. Okay, so it was a wonderful presentation. And if you next time you please organize a workshop on cystoscopy in our next conferences. I think
Sure, sure, sir, we'll do that.
Seniors and juniors, both seniors and juniors will be benefited by the practical demonstration of cystoscopy, at least diagnostic cystoscopy.
Thank you, sir, for joining. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Maiti. It's a pleasure to see you.
A wonderful presentation.
Yeah, hi. I think Dr. Biju is one of those who has been doing a lot of these procedures in his hospital is near the Bhutan border in Assam. So he's been able to do cashless surgery.
Videos that was done in our hospital.
Maybe next time you can have a live DJ stenting or something if you have one. You can show it to them.
I have one disease stenting posted on Saturday.
You could have done it during the class.
If
you have one more, you tell us, then we'll show it live.
Are you using the laptop cystoscope or?
No, the
regular one. Okay.
He doesn't have. I think Boto has the laptop cystoscope.
Actually, sir was showing that video which was recorded in our hospital.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Thank you for
accident faced with suprapubic this one ureteroscopy, SPC.
See, another thing we can do is that see if you go through the normal say cell phone,
yeah,
and they can click camera.
I was doing trying with my mobile, sir. Was not able to connect.
No, then there is an option which says share screen.
Sir.
I think maybe.
Hello, sir. Good evening, sir. Mati, sir.
Jubi, thank you. Jubi.
Biju, sir.
Biju.
You are doing good job.
Yes, sir. I'm in OT. Just completed one lap cholecystectomy.
Oh, good. So whether this COVID is affecting your region?
In our district, it is there, but still not in our hospital. The cases, we haven't found any case in our hospital till now.
No, around in your place in that region.
Yes, it is there around some 15 kilometers away.
Oh.
It's been affecting those doctors in government hospital also.
Okay. Now, from today in our region, the lockdown has started.
Oh, sir.
So all restriction will be there.
Yes, yes.
See, now I am sharing the screen from here.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So we're able to do that. First, go to the Zoom, then
Yes, sir.
share, and then go to share screen, and then go to the camera. So then we'll be able to actually, if any of you are interested in doing it, we'll be able to supervise the work from here also. I think
Yeah, I'd just like to supplement that, sir, for the participants. When you, from WhatsApp, for example, or even from your email, if you're on your cell phone and you click on the link to join the meeting, you'll get one window will pop up. Then you'll find a small pop-up will come up at the bottom of your screen. And that is very easy to miss. And I get a lot of calls saying that I can't connect, something is wrong. So
Oh,
just
maybe I missed.
yeah, it's just a possibility, but it's something
Yes,
I
yes,
think is significant to mention. So just look for a small pop-up which is asking your permission to launch the Zoom app, which is already downloaded on your phone. So once you accept that, then in future you shouldn't have any problems as long as you check the box which says don't ask again or something like that.
Okay. Thanks,
Something to
Kishore.
remember for all our
Thanks, Kishore.
participants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think.
Thank you very
Nara,
much
sir.
for joining,
Sir.
everyone.
Thank
Sir,
you.
I'm in OT. 3 more cases are waiting.
Oh,
Planning to do Gill's cholecystectomy, all 3.
so
The
any of you
previous case,
want to watch, you can continue. Want to show it to them?
the case is not yet ready, sir.
Okay.
Case is under anesthesia now, preparing.
So next time what you do is when you're planning any surgery, when you saw how to do it in the phone, no? So you ask somebody to use the phone and show the surgery. Then we can
Yes, sir.
show it live to people who are interested.
Sure, sir.
You can show right starting from the close-up how they're fixing the left and this thing, making the incision, all that. This you can ask Charles as one person to sort of exclusively do that. So you go to this thing and with the Zoom share and then share screen and then go to camera.
Okay. Last case, I could not proceed with gills. I tried gills.
Oh.
Huge distension of bowels, so it was difficult, no space. So I had to convert to conventional lab.
That's okay, no
With
problem.
gas.
Anyway, you're recording all that, no?
Yeah.
And, so we have any problem, then again you can call us also. Now we have nothing to do, so we'll be there to sort of see the thing. And
Yes, sir.
I hope Dr. Sukumar Maiti also will be available for comments.
Yes, sir. Since the start of the lecture.
When is the sir next Zoom plan? Any planning for the next Zoom meeting?
Yeah, every Thursday, sir.
Every Thursday it is being.
Every Thursday, same time, 5:45 in the evening.
Okay.
You join us every time.
Okay, I will try. Actually, today I had the operation at 6.
You
6.
finished
So
quickly.
I
Okay.
started doing at 2:30 to 2:45. So I could complete it and I joined at 5:50 or 5:55 like that. Little late.
Okay.
I'm happy only for today's program. I just planned little bit in a different way my operation schedule.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you again, everyone,
Thank you,
for
sir.
tuning in.
Thank you, Gopi. Thank you, Keso.
Thank you very much, sir. Great to see you.